Well, welcome back to Kindness and Truth. We have a great topic and a great guest today to discuss. I think you're going to want to hang around and listen. As you do so, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. There's going to be more great content like this coming up. Well, my guest this morning is Mark Trammell, and Mark is an expert in a particular area that seems to be in front of the nation these days. And unfortunately, in many ways, it's going to be even more so in the days, weeks, and years to come. That issue is children being transitioned and medically transitioned, often surgically transitioned. Mark has been involved with helping kids and families who realized that they made a mistake and wanted to go back, and dealing with the aftermath of that, and in particular litigating the issues. So we're going to have a good conversation. Thank you, Mark, for being here with me.
Dan, thanks for having me.
And welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how you got to the place where you are at the moment.
Sure. How long do you have, right?
Yeah.
So my name is Mark Trammell. I'm the Executive Director and General Counsel of the Center for American Liberty. It's funny, we, as an organization, we started about 3.5 years ago with this idea that we were going to kind of stand in these gaps in the civil liberties edifice and represent people who were kind of left behind and needed an advocate on First Amendment grounds, on these, at the time, were the civil liberty issues that were, I think, most pressing. Shortly after we got started, COVID happened. And then that was like this civil liberties issue where churches were being shut down. Kids were being denied the
Your focus very broadly on civil liberties.
But also not trying to duplicate what other organizations are doing.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to out ADF. They do a fantastic job.
Alliance Defending Freedom, another great organization. Yes.
Terrific organization. Beckett Fund, there are several kind of in that space. And we're looking to do something a little bit different. So we kind of cut our teeth in the COVID litigation. We had 3 cases that won at the United States Supreme Court defending the rights of Californians, faithful Californians, to go to worship. In fact, one of them I'm particularly proud of was a case for a home pastor who was not able to have Bible study in his basement.
In his own basement?
In his own basement, because Governor Newsom's, his order said that family units, you couldn't have more than 3 family units in your home. But of course, you could have as many family units as you wanted at the marijuana dispensary down the street.
Well, you have to have our priorities straight, right?
Yes. And so now here we're kind of out of this this COVID litigation era, and
for the moment.
Yeah, that's right. But what we're seeing is this, I think, this civil liberties issue of our time is this pipeline of gender transition for kids. So it's a classroom to operating room pipeline, and our organization is kind of, we're litigating on both ends of this pipeline, and we're a little bit unique because we're not. In some of these lawsuits, we are suing the government, which is kind of typical of a public interest civil liberties firm, but not in all of them. So on the medical side of this, we're suing hospitals, we're suing doctors who are responsible for this child mutilation.
Yes. Now, I want to go back just a moment because this is a great conversation, but our viewership is very international, actually is a bit international. So let's talk about 2 terms. First, the civil, when you talk about civil liberties, I think it's a little bit clear from the context, but second, the First Amendment, and how does that relate to, why is that so important? And what does that mean to us as Americans, and what should it mean to people all over the world?
Right. Well, in America, you can say just about anything you want, so long as you're not.
What's so great about that? Why is that
it's
important?
Really great.
Yeah,
it's really great because it prevents tyranny.
Yeah.
Or at least it provides a mitigating factor to tyranny. I think good arguments could be made that certain elected officials are tyrannical in the way that they lead, but we have the ability to speak out, and that gives us more free and more fair elections when the American people are allowed to voice their opinions on important issues that affect them directly without fear of retaliation from the government. And so when I'm talking about the First Amendment and free speech, I think that's a right that every human should have, regardless of your country. I think that there are fundamental liberties that are so fundamental that our founders recognized them to be beyond the reach of the government without some narrowly tailored law to the
well, and they're properly categorized, and I believe that freedom of speech and freedom of conscience is properly categorized as a bona fide human right.
Right.
It's something that we all have inherently by virtue of being humans, that we do not need permission from any government to exercise it. In fact, we need governments to restrain themselves from infringing upon that. That's very good. Now, when we talk about the First Amendment, freedom of speech and so forth, how does that tie into the issue that we're looking at today?
Yeah. So on both ends of the spectrum, we're talking about primarily parental rights. Which
is also a right that is recognized, I believe, in the U.S. Constitution.
It is.
Certainly in the Virginia Constitution explicitly, I believe.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. So in the U.S. Constitution, it's not, you're not going to see the term
statement, parental rights. Correct, yeah.
But we do see it through case law, interpreting the 14th Amendment, due process, and then as well as it applies to the
I've seen it challenged recently by people who say, oh, that doesn't exist, that's a make-up thing. Or made-up thing, but however, I believe the founders never envisioned that we'd be in a place where we are today.
It's well-settled law through Myers-Pierce and its progeny that parents have a fundamental right, fundamental right to direct the upbringing and education of their kids.
Yes.
And so that includes, if you're talking about the upbringing of their children, that's a broad term. That would include making medical decisions as well.
Right.
And so I think what we're seeing so much of in American public schools are government officials. I mean, these are government officials. They work for public schools.
Correct.
Government
our
schools. Our employees, right. Making medical decisions behind parents' backs. And in fact, going as far as to make medical decisions and then to be lying to parents about the decisions that are being made. And that's where we see this enormous violation of parental rights. And that's why the lawsuits you're seeing kind of pop up around the country, I think, are so important. Some of them are seeking injunctive relief. We have one in Northern California on behalf of a mom whose 5th grade daughter was being socially transitioned at school from female to male, all without mom's knowledge or notification or consent.
When did she find out?
She found out after the school called her in for a conference. And that's kind of a pattern we're seeing. We had another parent who, so that's Aurora Regino. Aurora is filing she filed her lawsuit for injunctive relief. In other words, we're asking the court to step in and to say, look, this policy, this parental secrecy policy that is across the state of California. It's a model policy from the California Teachers Association to say that this is unconstitutional, and the court should step in and put a stop to it. There are also lawsuits where parents are now seeking financial damages. For the violation of their rights, and you can do that, and it's their right to do it. They should do it. We see the left does that a lot.
And what's the effect of? You say we should do that, and I think there are a couple of reasons why we should do that. Number one, there's the justice and the compensation, but there's another reason too, which is
I think it's
deterrence.
It's a deterring effect. It's a very strong deterrent. So we represented Jessica Conan. Jessica, single mom and a rural area of California, very conservative community. At the time, her daughter was in the sixth grade. She just started middle school. She was invited to join this equality club. Interestingly, this was the one club that met during lunch. All the other extracurriculars are after school. And that's purposeful, right?
Parents, so they can catch more kids.
Well, and parents have to know about it if it's after school, because parents have to arrange for pickup. The kids aren't getting on the bus. Right? So Jessica's daughter was invited. She at first said no thank you, and the school persisted. And eventually she went to these meetings. They convinced the 6th grade girl that she was bisexual. She didn't know what that was. 6th grade, you should be non-sexual, right? I mean, you're 6th grade. Then they convinced her she was transgender. They changed her name on all the school documents. They changed her sex designation, and then they allowed her to start using the faculty bathrooms, all without Jessica's knowledge. And so we stepped in and filed a lawsuit on her behalf, and it took about a year to litigate, largely because we were representing both Jessica and her daughter Alicia. And when you're representing a minor, the litigation is going to take a lot longer. You have to have a guardian ad litem approved by the courts, and it does slow things down. But at the end of the litigation, it resulted in $100,000 settlement for Jessica and for Alicia.
And this just happened.
Just happened over the summer.
Just
happened over the summer.
So now, on these matters, of course, we're talking about parents and children. There are multiple parties involved in this, and then there are the people on the outside who are the teachers or whatever, and the whole assertion being made by many teachers and politicians that the kids don't belong to the parents. They're really, it's the world that takes a village, all these kind of things. But it is good to remember, and particularly, and maybe we can focus, I want to hear some more of the individual stories as well. But when it is sometimes being asserted that consent, that a child under the age of 18, typically the age of consent is 18 years old. And that's when you can go and make your own decisions and so forth fully without anybody else telling you what to do. Why is that so important? And why do you think, what are some of the arguments that you see for that children of 12, 13 years old can give consent, and give us an evaluation of why you think they're right or wrong?
Yeah, well, I think legally they can't give consent.
Yeah.
Under 18, you lack the capacity to sign a contract, to buy a cigarette, to do a whole host of things.
Yeah.
You can't get a tattoo.
Yeah.
But we're allowing,
that's good.
we're handing these young kids as young as 12, 13 years old a prescription pad to then have healthy body parts amputated.
Right.
So it does provide a pretty significant contrast.
That's going to have lifelong consequences.
Lifelong consequences.
You probably were in a fairly mature and good judgment at that age. And
No.
Okay. So obviously, I think many of us and many of your viewers will understand that you kind of hope that there's somebody not letting you do every single thing that you want to do at age 12, 13, 14 years old.
I was a knucklehead at that age.
Yeah.
But that's why you have parents.
Yeah.
That's why you have parents to step in and to direct you, to give you guidance and wisdom. When you're that age, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And that's I think an important concept here. And so on the medical side, what we're seeing on that latter end of this pipeline, right, is we're seeing consent being coerced. And so if someone is going to have a medical procedure, there has to be informed consent. And so that's an important concept. That's where that line of litigation stems from.
Right.
So it's not just that their parents have signed off on it, they've signed off on the procedure. It's that they were informed in doing so.
The informed part is a big part of it, a very important
It's everything.
Part. Yeah.
It's everything. And what we're seeing are parents and children being lied to, being deceived by medical professionals who have a financial interest, by Big Pharma, who has a huge financial interest in getting kids on puberty blockers as young as possible, because they have to stay on this for the rest of their lives.
The rest of their life. Lifelong customer, no choice whatsoever. You can maybe choose among the options of your providers, but that's going to be a major outlay for a long time.
Right. Well, and in places like California, a lot of our litigation ends up happening in California. You see some of the worst policies being introduced in California. We try to stop them there before they spread across the country.
Yeah.
But in California, I forget the age. It may be 16. But when you're under a certain age, the state will pay for these procedures and medications for you.
Which means really the taxpayers will pay for them.
Correct.
And that's a
correct
real problem. Yeah.
And so there's a financial incentive for them to start this treatment, this care path early on, before kids are even really starting puberty. But I think what we're seeing is this concealment. I think so. We're talking about informed consent. We're seeing doctors conceal less invasive treatment options. We're seeing them never talk to kids about counseling. They're going right to puberty blockers. Or in the case of our client Luca Hine, she was 16 years old, and doctors went straight to a double mastectomy.
Yeah.
No puberty blockers, no testosterone, no counseling, just amputation.
Well, and this is one of the things that has come up on the informed side of the informed consent. If you went to the doctor for anything, whatever, and you had done your Google WebMD kind of thing, and you went and you sat, and this does happen because my wife is a physician, patients will come in and they believe they already know what is wrong with them, and they merely tell the doctor, I've got such and such, and I need such and such prescribed to me. Is a doctor, according to their oath, is that what they're supposed to do? Let the patient self-diagnose and then just give them whatever they want? No,
I think that would uniformly be malpractice.
Okay.
The same is true in the practice of law.
Yeah.
Like a client may come to me and say, I'm going to file this lawsuit, class action lawsuit, whatever it is. If there's not a viable claim there, I can't file that lawsuit.
Right.
That's malpractice.
Correct.
The same is true in the field of medicine.
So what we're seeing, and you know where I'm going with this, is that the standard of care is being changed for political reasons inside the medical licensing organizations and so forth. And doctors are approaching, whether out of ideological drive or out of fear, because the mob is coming after people who don't go along with this this affirmation period of everything, is somebody comes in. And are you aware of any case in which a child or somebody comes in and tells a doctor, I think I'm transgender, and the doctor does a proper differential diagnosis and asks questions rather than just simply affirming and starting them on? And what is standard of care now? Because I do know that standard of care is affirm. Right? Yeah.
Well, it's been... there's been a huge push for that to be the widely accepted, and you see, especially in these issues, there's an organization called WPATH, whose guidance, I mean, they're very, I think, radical, pro transition of minors organization, but even their own standards would say that you have to put kids on puberty blockers or testosterone for a year before you would operate. And we're seeing
they're shortening that timeline.
We're seeing it shortened, and we're seeing doctors deviate from even that guidance. And Luca's case is a perfect example of that. I mean, and Luca is not in California. Luca is in Nebraska. The lawsuit for Luca is against the University of Nebraska's medical center. They went right. The very after
tell us the timeline. Tell us what happened.
55-minute consultation. They diagnosed her with gender dysphoria disorder, and
parents present or not?
Parents did sign off on the but again under coerced consent.
And probably not full informed consent either.
Always coerced. These parents are always told you have a choice between a dead daughter and a live son. They're always told, and it doesn't matter what gender clinic. These gender clinics are popping up all over the country. They have the same literature, brochures.
Is that true?
Oh, it's absolutely.
No, but I mean, is that true?
Oh, the dead daughter or live son? No.
It's
Statistically, we see that there's about a dozen studies now that show that roughly 80% of kids who suffer from gender dysphoria are going to age out of it at adulthood. In other words, when they get through their puberty years, this incongruence in their mind is going to resolve itself. And so it's absolutely not true. It's a lie.
And I'm seeing, I mean, we'll discuss this at another time because I don't think we're prepared with numbers here, but that the suicide rate for people who have gone through with transition is not appreciably lower.
It's higher.
And that the suicide rate overall for people who are struggling with these kind of things is only, I mean, it's still a very small number. It's not anywhere near, it's something, you measure it in the tens of thousands, 3 or 4 in the 10,000, something like that. I'll check those numbers, but it's not like you want a dead son or a living daughter or vice versa, right?
Yeah. So there was a 30-year population study out of Sweden, which is probably the best study on this issue, and it looked specifically at females. Females who transition are 19-fold more likely to commit suicide than the general population. This is it's a complete lie, telling kids that and telling parents that these kids are going to commit suicide unless you affirm. In fact, our client Chloe Cole, Chloe was 15 when she had a double mastectomy. They put her on puberty blockers and testosterone at 13. She never had a suicidal ideation until she had a double mastectomy. So we can look at stats. We can also look at real people and real experiences and their stories, and it's very compelling.
Well, and you can only imagine if you make a decision that is a permanent decision, and you don't go back from a double mastectomy, right? And then later on you realize I made a mistake, or maybe that wasn't right, or maybe these people didn't tell me everything, or whatever. How deeply agonizing that realization must be.
Well, and for Chloe, I mean, her story, she's such a rock star. Chloe is everywhere now. She is boldly telling her story. She's testified before Congress, state houses. She's speaking on college campuses now. telling kids this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
Because there's such a well-funded narrative.
Yeah.
In fact, the New York Times published an article basically saying, don't listen to Chloe Cole because her story doesn't really...
It's amazing.
She's like one person. But the number of people who regret or who are detransitioning is a growing number.
Right.
Because what we're seeing, we saw this push over the last several years to transition kids, and now after a few years they're realizing what's happened to them. So Chloe will be the first to tell you she doesn't know if she can ever have children.
Yeah.
She's 18 years old.
Wow.
That decision, she was not capable of making that decision as a 13-year-old or as a 15-year-old being treated by a gender clinic. And if she is able to have children, she'll never be able to nurse her babies.
Right. And we can have a separate conversation about doing these kind of things after age 18 and whether it is responsible practice of a physician to participate in something like that's entirely elective and not medically necessary. But in this category of kids, it's just so frustrating.
It's heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking as a parent, kind of uniquely heartbreaking as a parent to see that happening to kids, even though it's not my kids, to see it happening to young people who they need to be protected from this stuff. Chloe, 2 years after her double mastectomy, the skin grafts falling off her chest.
Wow.
She has to still bandage her chest because it oozes
on a regular basis.
Wow. And where are her doctors now? They're not responding. Left to her own to figure it out for herself.
Or she has to pay for medical care.
And that's another issue. You see, the transitions are covered. Detransitions are not covered by health insurance. They're not covered by state provided
That is a very
insurance.
interesting point. So you will fund the move in this direction, but not...
I mean, we're seeing this has been going on for a while now, but we're seeing state legislatures ban any type of conversation, labeling it as conversion therapy, as child abuse somehow. If you're having just an honest conversation about...
Well, let's look at this from all sides kind of thing. You can't do that, right?
Can't do that. You have to affirm.
Yeah, and that going back to the very beginning where we're talking about the First Amendment, freedom of speech and so forth, what we have found, and I believe that the rationale behind us having freedom of speech and affirming it so strongly in this nation is the idea that in an adversarial kind of context, truth will tend to prevail.
Right.
The truth doesn't always prevail.
Right.
It needs a good advocate and supporter and whatever, but the only ones that benefit when you start suppressing ideas are those that are bad ideas.
Right.
Bad ideas survive much better when good ideas are suppressed. Right. Is that right?
So
that's, if I can say it in a nutshell, I think that's the whole logic. And that's why we want to really push back, I think, against this. And, look, if it's really such a good idea to transition kids at age 12 and do these surgeries and whatever, let's have a conversation about it and let's go forward with full steam ahead. And I'm not saying that is the case, but let's have it in the full light of day and a full and fair discussion. And I think the fact that that's not occurring is very telling. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Well, what we're seeing are physicians who are afraid of losing their medical license because this idea of medical freedom, which is an extension of free speech, right? It's just
so patient to be able to even do the thing that's against your own interests, but you have the right to make your decisions about your own self and
your own conscience as well. It's compelling someone to say something they don't believe, compelling them to do something that would violate their conscience, that violates their civil liberties in the Constitution. And it's horrifying, but that's what's happening. That's where we are.
A book just came to my attention, and we're going to be starting a book group actually soon. It's and I believe it may be one of the first ones that we discuss. It's called The Right to Be Wrong.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
I've not.
I hadn't either,
but
I think it's a fantastic title, and it really talks to it. It hits what we're talking about.
So this is an area that absolutely needs more attention, needs more discussion. We're seeing parents go to school board meetings being I saw on Twitter this week, and Twitter is just a dumpster fire, so don't you can spend too much time on that. But there was a school board meeting, and the teachers union signed up for all the speaking spots,
Right, yeah.
so that parents couldn't actually go speak
boy,
out.
yeah.
I one of my clients up in Maine, Sean McBrearty. Sean went to the school board meeting. RSU 22 is the school district up there. Went to the school board meeting and decided to speak out against some of the actions of one of the teachers because his daughter was in the school. He knew the woke, crazy ideologies that were being pressed upon these kids. And so it's interesting because there were people in the community who at previous school board meetings had spoken affirmation about this teacher, not in like in the trans context of affirmation, but just saying wonderful things about this teacher. And then Sean goes up and says, this is what's really going on, how he doesn't support it, and was critical. They pulled the plug on him. They kicked him out.
Took the mic away from him. Okay,
and had police escort him off. And then they issued a restraining order against him so that he couldn't go on school property, because this school district has a policy that you can praise them, but you cannot criticize them at school board meetings.
Teachers.
Anyone related to the school district.
So was he overtly threatening?
No, he didn't threaten anyone.
Was he obscene?
No.
Okay, so
the people who are obscene are the people who are putting books in libraries.
I'm just asking for the for our viewers to understand. So this sort of thing is happening, and it's a very big shift on the American scene to have silencing by, again, as you said at the beginning, these are public servants. Right. They're our elected representatives and the people hired to serve us in a public office.
Right.
And they're now pushing a particular, and in fact, I wrote an article recently called talking about the establishment of religion in Loudoun County Public Schools. They're establishing an ideology, a worldview, a religious view. These are metaphysical assumptions that they're saying you must affirm these or else you must either be silenced, kept out of the school grounds, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that I think is the problem. What do you foresee in the next 5 years or so, and what do you think that we can do to push things in a better direction?
Yeah. Goodness, it's really hard to predict the next 5 years. I think back 3 years ago when we were litigating
so much change, right?
The COVID stuff. I mean, I would not have thought we would be filing medical negligence lawsuits. That was a foreign concept to me, and completely outside of my scope of litigation. I think we're going to continue to see a lot of this pushed forward, and parents need to. Everyone, not just parents, actually, everyone needs to educate themselves on the issue and be willing to read and listen and not just to the filtered ideas that are
accept
presented.
Everything at face value, right? Yes, correct.
And to question what they're told on legacy media.
It used to be that this is the radical left, whatever, question authority or whatever. Here we are. We're standing for basic what many people would say common sense, and we're saying question authority. Right? Yeah,
absolutely. Think critically.
Yeah.
Our kids and schools are not taught to think critically.
Yeah.
They're indoctrinated. And we have to return to this idea of being able to look at a concept, to be able to question it, and that's okay to question. That's good to question it.
Sure. It's not saying that you're going to say everything, you're going to come to the conclusion that everything is wrong.
Right.
But you want to think about it.
Well, and you said a moment ago, truth tends to rise.
Yeah.
But when there's this contention, right? When there's this questioning, this exploration.
Yeah.
So there has to be more of that. But when I think of the next 5 years,
you have your argument without fists involved.
Right. And without making it emotional.
Yeah.
I think having a rational conversation with someone is a lost art these days. If we had this conversation in a different context, a different setting, folks would rather than engage with us on merits of anything that we've said today, would label, transphobic, whatever it is. Yeah. There's a smear campaign to silence, and that's the purpose, to silence, to keep people from thinking.
It is a form of terrorism. This is the same logic that underlies terrorism, even what we see and so sadly going on in Israel this week. The commitment of atrocious acts, and these don't rival those acts at all, but the principle is the same, is that you mercilessly attack people who are doing the things that you do not want them to do.
Right.
And other people looking kind of on from the sides, see what's happening to you, and they decide to keep their head down, to refrain from whatever the activity is that is prohibited. Right. And in this case, the free discussion of these matters is what they're seeking to prohibit.
Yeah,
right?
That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. But, I think we are seeing parents start to fight back.
Yeah.
We're seeing parents who are now very educated on the issue, run for school board. We're seeing school boards flip, which is great. Conservatives...
We're about to see, God willing,
the
Loudoun County School Board flip.
That's right. That's right. I think of the Chino Valley Unified School District. Chino Valley, I think largely, parents saw what happened to Jessica and to other parents. Yeah. And parents were outraged, right? Yeah. So they ran for school district, and they won. And they flipped that school board. And one of the first things they did was they changed the parental secrecy policy into a parental notification policy, saying, look, if the school is going to affirm gender transition in school, they have to notify the parents, which is like the most common sense. Of course you would have to notify the parents. Yeah. Growing up, if they gave you a Tylenol, they would have to notify the parents. Now they're providing psychiatric care without notifying parents. Yeah. And so...
completely inappropriate.
The Attorney General of California filed a lawsuit against the school district. We're arguing next week in a San Bernardino courtroom.
So on your side, the Attorney General filed a good lawsuit?
No, the Attorney General of California...
Oh, to get them to continue to... because when they changed this policy, to get them to go back.
He's suing to have this parental notification policy invalidated. So we're going to continue to see this butting of heads between parents.
This is where you're fighting.
Yes. Yeah. Parents rising up. Yeah. And then big government using the full force of government to push that down. Wow. And so parents have to be persistent, because I think parents are going to be successful in Chino Valley. I'm a little biased. We do represent parents. We are arguing next week that lawsuit. Yeah. But I think even if California courts don't rule the way I think they should, I think we'll see other courts across the country that rule correctly. And
eventually something is going to rise up.
I think eventually this issue, in some form or fashion, is going to make its way to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, yeah. Well, for the record, we've done a lot of what could be perceived as California bashing today, but we recognize. Well, I have friends and relatives in California who've said, not all Californians are like this, and we recognize that there are a lot of really good people in California who are being abused by their government, and our hearts are with you, and we pray for you, and hope that things will turn around.
That's right.
Thank you, Mark, for the things that you do. Is there anything that you would like to say more?
Yeah, I would just conclude. I think this is a. Well, first of all, I think this is a social contagion. This transgenderism is a social contagion.
Define what you mean by that.
Well, I think, for example, in the context of a classroom, one or two students start identifying, and then it inspires others to, especially when teachers are having conversations, which I think are really inappropriate, especially based on a student's age.
Teachers shouldn't be broadcasting their own, for example, sexual activities to their children. Even wearing a pin or something saying, kids don't need to know what you are doing in your, in that area of your life.
So we're seeing whether it's on social media, TikTok, like to all of your viewers. First of all, your kids shouldn't be on TikTok. You shouldn't be on TikTok. Yeah. This is not a good platform. But listening to Chloe, our other we have another client, Layla Jane, who had a double mastectomy at 13 years old. All of these kids will tell you they were presented with propaganda on TikTok and other social media platforms that presented transitions, gender transitions, as this salvation to happiness.
Correct. Yes.
And it's part of this propaganda to deceive. Yeah. Part of this social contagion. That's
your life is going to be better if you do this.
If you do this, you're going to experience joy. Yeah. And it's been so engineered to reach adolescent females. Yeah. And we look at what's happening, whether it's equal opportunities in education and in sports. It's the young girls who are losing out. Yeah. Who are being victimized by this. But I want to leave you with a stat. Kaiser Permanente's Northern California gender clinic between 2015 and 2018 had 417 patients between the ages of 3 and 17. The average age being 16.4 years old.
Okay.
77% of those patients ended up getting mastectomies. 77%. And 60, I think
these
62.
These are all female patients.
No. These are, they end up being, the vast majority are female patients.
Right.
But just to show
But
the
77% of the female patients, or 77% of the total number of patients?
The total number of patients. So that shows you how many of the patients are female
So
patients.
it's even a greater percentage of the female patients?
Yes.
Oh my
goodness.
goodness.
It's a greater percentage. And 62.5% had at least one diagnosed mental illness beforehand.
Right.
So it's vulnerable young girls
who are sometimes dealing with other mental issues.
And instead of receiving the counseling that they need on these underlying issues, the depression, anxiety, a lot of them are on the spectrum for autism. They're having trouble in school.
Oh my goodness.
These are the kids who are being targeted in schools to join these equality clubs. They're being put on this track to transition. And if you listen to the story of like Abigail Martinez, it's a heartbreaking story. Her daughter was told in a public school that she was a boy, and Abigail was not supportive of that transition. She had concerns. The state took custody and put her in a group home.
Took her out of her parents' home.
Yeah, put her in a group home.
Her parents love her. Yeah,
and at the end of the story, she commits suicide as a ward of the state. Completely separated.
This is what you told me about the other day.
It's horrifying. The state wedging itself between a relationship between a mom and a daughter. We can't have this. It's got to stop. It's madness. And even we saw this past weekend. We saw Gavin Newsom sign a bill into law that would allow 12-year-olds. So we started this conversation talking about the age of consent. This new legislation that he's just signed would allow a 12-year-old without parental notification, consent, to become a ward of the state, go to a group home, and to receive the gender-affirming care that they desire. Without, the state doesn't even have to tell a mom and dad. So a parent could be at home thinking, where's my child? Why is my child not home? The state knows, and Gavin doesn't think you have the right to know.
No. My goodness.
It's horrifying. So we have to stop this before it spreads further.
I mean, if this was your son or your daughter, and this could be the son or daughter of some people who are watching this video, because they're out to get as many people recruited to this as they can. This is a deeply concerning matter. Thank you, Mark, for telling us about it, and that's heartbreaking to hear about this young woman who took her own life because she was taken from her family. Well, I mean, we can't attribute causality, but I think you can really see what is going there and imagine a different scenario having played out. And that's really heartbreaking. It must be totally heartbreaking for her family, as it is for anyone who loses a child. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
And do well and keep up the good work and go get them.
Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments below. We'll be happy to take a look and answer them. Thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. Okay, thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks for having me.
It'll take some time. I'm still getting the other one edited and doing some other things, but it'll be not too long until that goes up.
Well, I feel like we could have talked for hours.
Yeah, no, that's really
there's no shortage of things
if we hit some of the important issues. Go ahead and feel free to grab more coffee.
Who's the artist?